Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're the hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every day, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can view all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues that affect you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
The plan and steering committee meeting. I think this is the third one, right?
Fourth,
okay.
but it's been since March.
Yeah. So I noticed that there's at least one new name on the Zoom that I didn't recognize. So we're gonna all go around and say our name and I guess our role. So I'll start. My name is Brad Sipple. I'm the community development planner for the city of Fitchburg, and I'm from the city side. I'm managing the South Stoner Prairie Neighborhood Plan Project. So we'll go this way.
I'm Al Brizak, representing Edgewood College, and I'm overseeing our development over on Lacey and Central Highway.
Robin Lober, Air Materials, representative for the Fitchburg Hill site.
Clint Winter, Banadon, landowner.
Jason Valerius, Capital Area Regional Planning Commission.
Steve Trumlett with MSA, leading the team on the neighborhood plan from the consultant side.
Olivia Bolton, I'm an assistant planner with MSA.
Do you guys want to, or do you want to just stay that? All right, sounds good.
Move around it.
Okay, and then on the Zoom, I think I saw Bill and, you know, the names aren't up anymore. So go ahead, Bill, and then.
I can take care of those two bills with Banadon.
Okay.
Jeff Parisi's Banadon too.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. All right. So I'll just, thanks everyone for coming. We got a few things to get through tonight. Steve's gonna share some slides, kind of overviewing the process, how we've gotten to where we are now, and then walking through the preliminary engineering stuff that was sent out yesterday. So I'll just turn it over to Steve.
Thank you, Brad. So we'll update the process. We'll talk about what I'm calling master land use update. We've sent you a memo back in July, and we'll talk about where it's gone from there, preliminary engineering, next steps, any public comment. Just want to go back since it was March. We did touch on this last time, but it's been a few months. We had about 25 people at the open house. We had this board about vision, phrases, and words. You see farmland preservation, mountain biking, nature trails. Walkability was noted multiple times, affordable housing, access to public transit. Other comments was connecting existing bike and hiking trails through the neighborhood to Quarry Ridge Park, incorporating city metro transit, preserve wildlife habitat where it's high quality, not where it's not being quarried, preserve the views and open space, more affordable housing, kind of repeating a little bit of what we saw in the vision image, but noting on the last bullet of option A is more preferred due to the housing shortage. We had 290 responses to the survey. We went through some of that last time, but just want to hit a little bit highlights more about the imagery portion of each of the density types. So what you're seeing here is green and orange. So we did ask questions, were these type of developments acceptable on the edge or in the middle of the neighborhood? So the middle is the orange And you're seeing, generally speaking, for low density, very positive reactions to all in any location. So there's duplexes and single family shown on that. And then here, medium density, again, still roughly at least half. Gets a little bit lower when you see, and the number 3 is kind of a fourplex, kind of a senior housing product that's out there, with number 5 being more than 12 to 16 unit, 2-story building. But yet still roughly around half of support of both at middle and edge. High density, this is where you see a little bit more breakdown. Number 2 obviously is much more densely populated and taller building and bigger mass. So that was seeing a negative reaction from both on the edge and in the neighborhood. But you see number 4, which shows, you know, a 5-story building, and while 42% is not a full majority, that's still getting relatively acceptable potentially on the edges of the neighborhood. Positive for number 5, those townhomes, and multifamily number 3 as well, similar boat, about 40 to 48%, depending where it's located. And we also looked at mixed use and commercial. You see lower percentages of something with 5 and 6, 5 being much taller building, bigger mass, 6 is a single commercial business. Yes, people could be reading into this a certain way about the materials versus just the use, but still gives us some perspective that, generally speaking, the 2 to 4-story mixed-use buildings was acceptable, as well as higher quality, like number 2 for retail and even openness to a quick trip. Business park uses, again, they're showing grades of them, but roughly about 50% for everything except for number 4, which is that larger mass 4-story office building, and for kind of a 2-story office with manufacturing behind it, number 5. So that was kind of quick, but I just wanted to kind of bring everyone back to speed from something we talked about back in March, which helps me to remember as well. Master land use plans, so I just want to briefly talk about, we started with these 2 bubble diagrams per our March meeting, preferred option A, but at the time we talked about putting Business Park east of Commerce Park to bring jobs into the neighborhood. But from comments from steering committee, property owners, other discussions with staff, that change, that memo you received in July shows where we extended potential extension of Commerce Park all the way through the study area. At the time it was potential. Collector A was then split with some stormwater options. We're showing an example of Sherrill Parkway here in Fitchburg of that similar kind of case. We provide that stormwater management as you go, creates an aesthetic for the neighborhood as well. Collector B, which is on the south end, is another route that would connect all the way to the east of the neighborhood. Business Park was moved to the west side of Commerce Park Drive with some flexibility. You see the hatching, which suggests it could be an either or. Generally speaking, the conversation was if the line between the 2 quarry owners would to come down where you would have a lower grade and more flatter area, more interest in the business park all the way to Commerce Park Drive versus the high density residential. This was still showing potential of a school within what is the study area. We did include more of the medium high density future land use category at the time that we did the bubble diagrams that wasn't adopted. So that was kind of a change to show a little bit more area that has that 9 to 20 units per acre. So where have we gone from that? Further communications came through from property owners and other steering committee members, and changes that you're seeing here is one, the idea of the school is still generally thought about in this neighborhood, but it's outside of the study area. Potentially it could go in the gap that's between what is proposed as a planned neighborhood to the northeast. So you can see my mouse. So right here is suggested school. When we talked about the school district, again, they were looking at lands potentially even south of here, but also noted that if there's enough residential development here, they may consider lands within this neighborhood. Ideally, they would get about 25 acres. If that includes additional parkland adjacent to, that could also be shared. So you are seeing what is a planned dedication of park to the north for the neighborhood, which there is great change there. For more athletic fields, you could potentially have a park to the west that kind of helps that get to what they're ideally needed. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. So what that does is open up more land for the business park. We rerouted a little bit of what connects up here the Legend Rock Road that kind of can service into this neighborhood for that business park and connects to Collector A. You're seeing a little bit more green than probably you'd think you might see there in Business Park. That's not parkland. That is, when we get to stormwater management discussions, that's why this is showing up as green. We'll talk about that. Inclusion of high density residential is that dark brown, more along Commerce Park all the way to the roundabout. I'm not getting my mouse to show up very well, but basically, originally it was just west of Commerce Park, now it's all the way through. Neighborhood mixed use, which is that pink. It showed up a larger area along Lacey Road, so that's the flexibility of standalone commercials, standalone high-density residential, or it could be the typical vertical mixed use people think about where there's ground, retail, or commercial with residential above. C, to kind of balance some of the additional high density you're seeing in Collector A and Commerce Park, we have more orange, which is that medium density residential to the south than previously shown. If I jump back, you can kind of see some of those changes that we're talking about here. Also moved Collector B further north. So in my mind, originally, I was thinking the same landowners to the south, it's not a one-sided road, but I also understand thinking through a little bit further with staff that this is the area that would come into the service area. So we don't know what will happen to the south. So we moved Collector B Road north to allow for development to be on both sides, which is more efficient for costs. Reworked a little bit of Collector A. Initially, it was saying we're just going to go east on an angle. We still have that shown as a potential option, but that would go into the solar farm. So to get to Seminole Highway for sure, one option is to take Collector A and curve it, an S-curve, and follow it as it's shown. Still an option to go straight through if that solar farm is no longer there, more direct route. So just showing a little bit of the acreage, seeing about 15 acres of business park. It could go up to 36 if all the hatch turns to business park, 7 acres of mixed use, 32 acres medium high, 29 acres of high density, could be up to 43. 25 acres for the school, notably at the bottom, 69 acres for parks, open space, and stormwater management. So part of what we'll show tonight is also what is eaten up by stormwater management is a big part of that, and what is left over for park. So let me pause. We'll talk also a little bit about the red lines, which is trails. So that was something new as well, so I should note that, I guess. So Lacey Road project has extended that trail on the north side all the way east to at least Seminole. I think it probably continues on beyond that, but it does get to Fitchburg. So we're showing how it connects from the neighborhood to the north where that Quarry Ridge Park is, through between the school and the business park, connects to Collector A, can continue south on Collector C and D shown there. It runs to the park further to the east. But generally speaking, the way it would exit the neighborhood is Collector B to the west, Collector A to the east, and it connects back into Lacey Road to the north. Any comments from where we went to where we are now?
I got some, if I can start. I appreciate all the work and effort that's gone into this, but looking a little closer at it from the one that was sent out yesterday, I have a couple questions because I'm not sure. Like the urban service area right now goes almost all the way down to Collector A, is that correct?
Yeah, so areas that are not rendered in that quadrant is all already in the urban service area.
But then, okay, so everything basically north of there, it's like, if I measure off your maps, 200 feet on the, from the property line on the west side and 250 feet or something on the east side, roughly following Collector A, I'm assuming. So where Collector A goes north then in an angle, and along with those areas in green, those are all in the current urban service area outside of the study area, is that correct?
Slightly up Collector A with the concept of this split for stormwater is partially into what is already in the service area, but none of the development pieces are inside of that already in the urban service area. So no actual development piece that I'm showing is in the current USA. Just
Correct, but by doing this, you're actually then taking away from what we can or maybe can't do on our existing property in the current urban service area. Is that correct?
potentially if a design of Collector A mimics what's shown here. Yes.
Well, I guess that's where I always run into a problem if it mimics what's shown here, and we ran into that on the north side of the road with just a minor plan amendment. Once it's on a piece of paper, people are going to be like, well, this is what we thought was going to happen, right? And that piece isn't even in this scenario, so why are we including it now if really it's supposed to not be in that park? Because I know when we talked at other meetings about looking south or other things, well, we can't even talk about it because it's not in the current South Stone or Prairie plan. But here we're adding things that are not currently in the South Stone or Prairie plan.
I've been corrected by staff. I don't believe there was a full real thought of design for what happens south of your neighborhood that you have designed there. And so it's kind of a missed section of discussion about how it interplays with this study area. And stormwater management is going to have to be managed some way, and maybe it can be altered, but that's the main key that's creating that expansion into what is outside of the study area. It's purely the roadway. And that is not a firm, that is the design for that.
And I'll add to the difference between the land south of the study area and what's northwest of the study area is that the land south is not in a future urban development area at all, whereas because the lands northwest of the study area are already in the urban service area, there's more sure probability that it will be developed at some point. So developing a future land use for that makes it's easier to do that because it's already in the comp plan and it's already in the urban service area. But right now though, it's showing as agriculture as the future land use, so.
But what we might come forward with that is completely different, because I know they talked about that when they were doing the other piece in the, further to the north about that being, I think, single family residential in that area and not school and park. Here we're going one step further and going, oh, hey, we think it's a good place for a school and park. So it's already, we're pushing that land use and really taking our ability and options away for how we want to even pursue looking at trying to develop that by putting some of this stuff in a plan like that.
I would say part of the conversations we've had, we took the school, which was suggested as a good connector and social neighborhood piece, complete neighborhood. We took it off the lands that you wanted business parks, so that was kind of an ebb flow discussion. And I would say if the school doesn't develop here, that is going to be the recommendation that it would be residential. It's a conversation of.
But it was also, I guess, from the school saying that, hey, we go to the south, so they already have plans to go to the south. That's how you open up part of the meeting.
They have.
So that just sort of gets left behind, and then that's getting pushed up onto us, you know.
I don't think it's defining that is only going to be a school property, and it's only going to be discussed in text. It's not going to be illustrated by rendering it as an ideal way to have a complete neighborhood. And in our conversations, we pulled it off to allow more business park, to leave that as a good opportunity location for it. Don't know where the school ends up. They haven't bought that land to the south. They're open for discussions, and I don't think this plan is firming that is a school site.
And I'll say that the school, I think, would like to prioritize a school that's integrated within a neighborhood and is walkable and stuff. And I'm not, the other area is not in a FUDA, so it's kind of hard to know whether that would fit their criteria or not. I was going to say, and the other thing that I'll point out here is that I'm pretty sure the current future land use for that whole section is agriculture. So identifying it in this plan as a potential school isn't further limiting your options from what is now, because now it's identified as agriculture in the future land use map. So it would need to be amended anyway for anything besides agriculture. If that makes sense.
that there's options that could go different ways, because people read one thing and then they run with that, and that's all they're gonna ever see. And then you need to have those flex, but that's why, like, when it came with the idea of doing the flexibility areas for the high-density residential, it could go either this way or that way, that made sense, right? Because then it's real obvious it could go this way or that way. We like that concept. We would have pushed all the way to collector A, I think is what we asked to do. But having that flexibility built in, because once it's on paper, people get rigid about it. Even though it's only, we work in the business, we know it because you know, plans are subject to change, we all know that. Once it's just trying to get a guiding document, but once it's out there in the public and published, people.
Sure. Yeah, we'll make it clear that schools of interest is a potential option, but alternatively, residential is a plausible use for that site as well.
My recollection of the school conversation was that it's kind of dependent upon the number of units. Yeah. Right.
And I think they were looking at if there's like.
And I can jump to that slide.
Oh, sure. I think their number was like 400 to 600 units, and we're.
Yeah, we're beyond that. I'll show that number. But here are some of the qualifications they're looking at for this. Is on this, walkable schools are one layer removed from the thoroughfare, meaning to be Fitchburg and Lacey is the thoroughfares. So in this essence, collector A would be that one layer removed. Hazard-free access to the site, such as crossing Lacey Road, would be a hazard. Access to adjoining green spaces like parks and dry storm retention. Joining lots that are ideally residential and not commercial. 3 points of entry. You could potentially have that 2 on collector A and 1 off that northwest corner there. Topographically allow for 1 to 2 story construction with a flat playground space, and that's obviously goes into beyond just mass grading, which is a plausible scenario. But unit-wise, we will be exceeding what they said is kind of a starting point for that conversation. Is there another point you wanted to hit on too?
That was the main one right here. Like I said, I just want to make sure they're off, and like the whole roadway thing, that threw me because I'm trying to get my bearings, and it's like, well, that's all the way up onto this other property, and you know, I didn't know that we were going up and going onto that property. It's by a substantial amount. It's 250 feet or so on that west side, so it's not a little bit. It's quite a bit.
Well, the reality would be if it were just a straight collector road, a lot of that development that we're seeing south of collector A would become stormwater management. You're just pushing it further into the neighborhood plan. So either way, you're losing land to what you have to manage stormwater.
Right, but it's the flexibility of the design for what actually can be done at the time versus sitting here and how many years ahead trying to have our crystal ball and come up with a design that may not work for what the real world situation and what the developer and the markets are going to take care of when this property is looking to develop.
I'm comfortable saying that that design as a potential neighborhood character doesn't mean it's locked to say the main part of collector A is it's connecting over to Fitrona and it's running through the entire neighborhood and potentially getting all the way to Seminole Highway. That's the key component, and it needs to have a good intersection with Commerce Park Drive. To the exact design we're showing here is something that you're getting to a planning level of and engineering a little bit of just what could be great for a neighborhood like this, not locking you into it.
But it's all your land, right? It's all Fitchburg Minerals, north and south of that line. And both Fitchburg East.
There's a line
right
here,
there, yeah.
And then at some point, I'm sorry, I don't know if it's
all your land, but I mean, the north and south of that.
Right, a little bit, 200 some feet south of the road, and then we hit the Wolf property, and then whatever's west of Collector, or whatever that north-south road is. So.
And I'll back up just for general speaking. The other part that was hit on was the future lattice map. Brad already mentioned that currently it has what the existing uses, and this is what we're creating. So the question was about the alleyways, for example. Part of what the exercise of the previous picture here is kind of thinking about the character that could be existing and what kind of housing types could be placed in here and get to a number of housing units, which plays into parkland dedication and some things like that, just to verify that we can achieve stormwater management and get to a certain understanding of potential of how many people could live here. This map
Now,
is what would be suggesting that these collector roads that we're calling would be the ones that need to cut through.
okay, so your other one though is titled, I think, preferred land use scenario. Does that go actually into the plan?
In the master plan section, yes, but not as implementation plan policy.
But then who's it, well, once it's in the plan, people are gonna look at it, is that right? And then who's it preferred by? It just says preferred. I mean, I don't know if that's preferred by these guys, if it's preferred by us.
Preferred by the city, right? This is the city's adopted plan.
That I don't know, that's why I'm asking the question, who says it's
This was a question.
preferred, because it's the first time we've seen it, so. And instead of preferred, if it's truly to meet what you just explained, it'd be better as a conceptual and not as preferred, because those words mean different things, right? And if really what you're saying is, hey, we went through this concept plan to verify rooftops and things like that, that makes sense. But to say it's preferred, then people are gonna be locked into that, no, this is what the city wants, this is what they preferred. And that's not necessarily what you just told me.
So
If I'm reading that wrong or not.
No, what I would say is that the preferred, it's preferred relative to the two, like, so we started with two bubble diagrams and then kind of narrowed that down into one preferred. So it's preferred relative to those two bubble diagrams, like that was kind of what.
Yeah, because if we looked at the land uses the way you have them laid out here, I could agree with that. For us, at least from our perspective, we were okay with that, right? Sure. It's when you start adding the alleyways and these other streets that, well, we don't know if that's necessarily preferred to you actually get in and engineer and design it and do that type of work, right? But I know where you're getting at with.
Yeah, and I'd say initially we call this concepts, but I forget what iterations where we decided that wasn't the right word for the public. I think that was confusing people.
Yeah.
Preferred's not the right word either then. So.
Well, where this is headed is a future land use map amendment, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing.
Yeah,
This is the
which
policy.
is, that's what
Yes.
that would be here.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Maybe we'll call it potential development concept or something as when it's talking about the character.
I mean, we're talking semantics. I don't care what label.
well,
we're comfortable with.
It's you may be talking about semantics, but we've been around enough that words matter, right? And in quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that the concept was because the public wasn't understanding what that
Yeah,
meant.
so understandable.
And when we have a document, we'll spell it out better. I think that will
Yeah,
help.
this is what it could be, and I get it, but it's more than just for this people in this room, right? So that's why I think we need to be very clear with the message that we're sending and what we're actually intending. So that's going to save staff a lot of headaches in the future, Deanna, right?
We like to save that.
So, and our engineering staff and their engineering staff, I mean, it's just gonna save a lot of things and be able to develop things faster, easier, and better.
I'm not making light of it. I'm saying I'm fine with the change, whatever we want to do there.
So,
Okay.
Thank you, Glenn.
So this part also we want to look at is parkland dedication. So the requirement for ordinance, if you go conventional zoning, is 2,900 square feet per unit, or you pay a fee in lieu of. And we're projecting on kind of a low to medium range of those future land use categories, where low density is 2 to 5, medium is 5 to 9, medium high is 9 to 20. So we're using some of those low mid ranges of that to determine that you're projecting about 1,440 units at the low end, up to 2,672 housing units on the higher mid range of that. What does that mean? It means the table that we're showing in the total neighborhood, we're showing 40 acres of parkland. What's required by that ordinance is between 96 and 178 based on those housing units. Shortfall of 56 to 138 acres. In discussion with staff, most developments don't end up building the full allotment because that could be an impact to maintenance over time. And another thing we look at is how, other part of it is how is it servicing the area? It's not just get the land and that's great. There's other open spaces, but we kind of put a dot kind of where we were showing potential park spaces in 1/4 miles, typically a distance you want all residents to be nearby. Sometimes the larger parks, you do a 1/2 mile, that's why I'm showing that one on the 17-acre one. So potentially there is a gap if you just look at 1/4 mile in the northeast portion there, and there could even be a private playground as part of development, or it could be somewhere built into, playground, a little playground, I can't get this mouse to work, up in this corner here where stormwater management wouldn't be. It just doesn't want to go there, somewhere about there. So the point being is, while we're not hitting the exact number of dedication, you can also have the opportunity to fee in lieu of, which helps support the parks in this neighborhood for where we are showing them. And this doesn't lock in specifically these parks and sizes. Generally speaking, the thought is that there would be a park on the south end of Commerce Park and Collector A, especially with how that will play into the neighboring properties that aren't going to be quarried. Any comments on that? And welcome for staff to say, add to that or correct me on anything I stated there.
I'll just add that we were looking at some of this a little bit closer today too, and I think there's a couple spots in there that likely have some very old trees that are currently shown as development, and I don't know how much it is, maybe 10 acres or something, but it might get us a little close if we put that in there.
This south edge you're talking about that we're showing on the screen?
Yeah, kind of where the I'll just stand up.
Yeah.
Somewhere in this general area, I think,
Okay.
and then up there too. But
Yeah.
that area was where we were looking at as a potential addition. It probably not even 10 acres actually. I don't know how big it is. Maybe 5 acres, but.
I've talked to a lot of communities, like, there's a lot of costs to keep these up, and you want to have good quality parks, so it's sometimes a balancing act.
Yeah, I'd say generally, I mean, I think with the 1/4 mile radii there, it's pretty well covered, and I think it's meeting the goals, I think, and the fee and lieu, I think for the most part we'd be comfortable with that, so.
Kind of already hit on this, I just jumped ahead a little bit. Was there any comments about what we're showing? So this is purely about potential off-road paths, multi-use paths. It's not showing the full consideration of routing, like there could be on-road that's safe on low trafficked roads. Just like when we're talking about connecting to Quarry Ridge, there's not a full path all the way up to that park. Local streets can handle bicyclists as well.
Did you already have totals on units, or is that still to come?
That was here, so between 1,400 and 2,700 units. If you go all the way up to the highest range for all the residential, it's up to 5,000, but I feel that's not a realistic number, that it all would be maxed out. So that's the range we're seeing, about 1,400 to 2,700 units.
Mm-hmm. Which sounds like a lot, but the regional housing strategy is showing 500 units a year. The city is supposed to be building 500 units a year right now and for the next 15 years. And where are you at right now?
We're not topping out to 500. We've probably been more in the 350 range.
Mm-hmm. So I guess on the topic of we go through this effort, and then how flexible is it still? In my mind, the route that roads take, that could change. The engineers get into it deeper and say, no, this really makes more sense, and the city would say, sure, that's fine. But some expectation that this level of intensity of development is what's going to be achieved here, I think, is something that should be fairly firm. So I wouldn't want to see the landowners come back and say, well, it was a good plan, but we'd really like to see more single family.
Well, part of it, the the market's gonna dictate some of that too. Some of that's outside of our control, right? So. But here, where we have that whole north part still where we can do that, that's why I said that's more, you know, we could accept the other part, makes sense, knowing that we can still build the single family in connectivity to what we've been doing, so it makes sense to us.
Mhm.
And obviously, some of the areas that we're talking about here fit into single family, just about how big are the lots.
Yeah.
Talked about the school. So a little bit about the engineering. I would say that we've had modifications of the land use plan that were, I think, still at the preliminary level, and we will be at the end of it, but I'm saying we're really initial. So I think it's a lot about what are we gonna flag about further review. The next meeting, I think we'll have a fuller picture even beyond what we have today. But just wanted to talk about it again. So we have, and I can be corrected if I'm wrong on this, that the orange is what is actually going to be excavated on Painted Dolan land. Originally, the reclamation plan, I said it could go further by that purple line to the south. Can you clarify if that's true or if I'm wrong on
It still can, depending on rock quality.
that? Okay.
So it's edge of formation. If the rock quality holds, then we'll still continue to mine it out. If it doesn't, then we won't.
Okay. Okay. But the intention we last talked was excavating down to 1030 to 1040 elevation.
That's more realistic when I talk to Deanna, yeah.
Okay.
That's more current conditions based on what we know now.
Okay. And then on the east side, where you see the reclamation plan there, going down around 1040 as well. But you're doing the area that you see in that purple and pink areas. Any question to that? So I kind of just pieced together what was originally the reclamation plans and kind of showing that that black line was that tie-in between the two properties where they have to come back to the current grade. That obviously impacts what is next to that. We've kind of stuck in the sand that we definitely want to see a road connection east-west and go over to Seminole Highway. So the areas that you see in the black dash lines is something that we're, the city side is strongly saying that that wall needs to come down to the point to allow for a road through there. But obviously to the north, that impacts what potential development can happen. Kind of illustrate that kind of here, preliminary grading of where you see that line is, almost off the sheet there, that if we're talking about business park, on the east side of that extension of that road, we're looking at 6% grades there. Obviously, they could be manipulated further, but it impacts potential of that use on the east side of that road. I think it's a little bit easier on the west side of that road that cuts through. So that's just something to think about. Obviously, you could come down a lot quicker, but you're also eating up the back half of that lot. Obviously, this can be modified where that road specifically comes in, but there is impacts to keeping that wall there. But we do want to break it down when you get to Collector A.
Who's gonna pay for that?
Part of development is writing the lands and meet road connections that are projected in city plans. That would be generally by the developer.
Why are we keeping the wall there?
Right now, we have our existing Fitchburg Minerals Quarry. We've mined up to almost, not quite the property line. And then we've been backfilling, reclaiming it there per the reclamation plan that he was showing earlier, 3 to 1 silt coming off the top of there, so. And then there's mining on their side. So then you got the joint property, because they got a certain setback they have to maintain. So you got those 2 areas, whatever's there in between, so.
And does that benefit the development of each side? Having a wall, having that there still? On paper, it doesn't make sense to me. So why are we showing it this way? Help me understand.
Well, we have a quarry that's been there for how many ever years, right? And then whenever they put NR 135 through, then required even non-conforming use sites like this one to have reclamation plan. So reclamation plan was put in place 25 years ago, which require high wall slopes to be reclaimed to 3-1. So we've been mining that site under those conditions and then also backfilling those high walls that have been exposed to the 3-1 slope. So those are existing conditions that we are bound right now to take care of and do. So per how we have to operate and reclaim the quarry. So,
And so.
So we're coming in and changing, putting a condition on there that's knowing this condition's already there. It's not we're doing it to fight the conditions. It's already there. That's what we have to do. That's what we're doing.
My understanding was that the one of the outcomes of this process is that the reclamation plans would be amended so that you could reclaim to develop status instead of to restore it as open space. And so the amendment of those reclamation plans would allow for an end form that makes sense.
We haven't had that conversation specifically with anybody that I know of.
What we're talking about here is an end form that doesn't match, in other cases, that doesn't match the reclamation plan, right?
Current conditions, basically.
I think we've had that conversation for sure.
Well, I think what Clint is getting at is that right now, a lot of this here is hypothetical. This is what folks would like to see, but we're bound by our reclamation plans to follow those until something else is firmly in place. Is that?
Pretty much.
And so at what point would you be willing to amend the reclamation plans to get rid of that wall so that we don't have a wall of stone left behind?
Well, for us, there'd have to be the value in moving all that dirt that's already been put in there now to reclaim it.
I mean, I don't know the cost of that, but again, I guess we're getting back to the preferred use that was suggested by owners, that you might have more value in that land if it was more suitable for the use that you're putting there. So I guess I would wonder if that cost balance equates to that.
But we've also said since day one that that's an issue. Since we started this project from the very beginning, we mentioned that's an issue. That doesn't have a solution at this point in time.
Okay.
What's the impediment? You say it doesn't have a solution. Like how would you get there? What's in the way of negotiating that?
Well, here's what are we negotiating for and to?
Readiness to develop the site is really the end goal, right?
But we can develop the site without doing that as well, right? So there's got to be a value that motivates you to go back and change all that what's already been done to account for that.
Yeah, so I guess it's the value of the land that is left unusable because of that wall. And I don't have a good enough sense from these illustrations just what that setback is, what's lost. And that's what I'm asking is, like, we're leaving behind this stone ridge. How much land and value are we leaving on the table because we left a stone ridge there?
That depends on what the end uses are going to be. So if you don't know what the end uses are going to be, you can't back into what that value is going to be.
Well, the plan will say, that's why we have the crosshatches. If in the future a wall could come down, potential that business park would expand because it's preferred by many entities, the idea of jobs in this neighborhood. But we are presenting what we know now.
What do you know about the quality of the stone in that wall? Is the stone worth something?
We have mined right up to the edge of it. So and then last few years, we've been reclaiming up along that edge, so it's all dirt and good old glacial till that's been backfilled along that high wall. So.
Then we looking at stormwater. See blue lines here are just general flows, and again, this is concepting out with the idea of this neighborhood as laid out with these road networks. But generally speaking, is that the orange is where ultimately water would exit the neighborhoods or the study area here. And so looking at sub-watersheds, that's what the red lines are. They're called sub-watersheds. They have numbers to them. And you see that there is that planned neighborhood in the northwest there that's shown in that exhibit on the west, on the left side there of how that would operate. Yes, you want to add to that?
Just a couple of things, and I think now this is the one that helps pique my interest, right? It shows that, and I think you answered, okay, we can change these, especially stormwater areas that are in the north part. But here again, I want to take out the colors of the blue for the school, the green for the parks, that kind of stuff to the north, because none of that's been decided and should be included as an exhibit in the plan. Because otherwise people are going to see that and go, there's a school there, and that's not what the intent is at this point in time.
Well, we'd have to be clear in there. I think part of the submittal to ultimately part of this process to get to a submittal for the urban service area amendment, what would be requested of that is understanding of how water would be managed. And yes, it's being speculative based on this plan versus a developer-led scenario. We have to project uses to get to a certain impervious area that is in the background of this. If we go to the next page is talking about what do we know about impacts.
Well, I guess nobody through this process has said that, hey, we're gonna go into your existing property that's in the urban service area and then start projecting uses and that kind of stuff. That has not been a discussion at all in any of our conversations.
And I would say actually,
what's already been reviewed and put through.
I will verify if that area was actually incorporated in the stormwater management. If it's not, we can remove it. I don't know clearly if that quadrant was incorporated. You're not seeing sub-watersheds in that area, so potentially I could take back my words and say that what's already brought in is not factored into this model.
So I get overall what you're doing, but by putting that use out there here, we're reinforcing that fact, which then reinforces my concern of why it's shown that way in the first place.
I think I'm feeling more confident in my statement right now that area that's outside of our sub-watersheds that we're showing in red lines is not part of the modeling. So I don't see we would actually ultimately have to show it.
Okay, and then
I'll verify that.
Specifically in area number 100, I'm assuming that's just a name for that stormwater area?
Correct.
So the size of the pond that you have shown up in the northwest corner is then accommodating all of that red area for area 100. Is that correct?
All area of 100
Pond within 100,
is
or 100.
Is managing the area, the 300, that one's partially serving it, and then it gets ultimately to the larger one. But yeah, a good portion of everything we're seeing here between what is labeled 300, 100, 105 is all funneling to the west and ultimately to Badger Mill Creek. Is that answering your question? So yeah, that is a larger area that's being managing because that's the end point of where, lowest point that it exits.
So how does that work then with, because, and here's where I'm gonna be a little selfish here, that's all shown on our property, but yet a good portion of the stormwater in that scenario is coming from adjoining lands that aren't on our property. So here all of a sudden we're losing value. Why they gain value? Because we have to then accommodate for all their stormwater onto our side.
Actually, the property line is really where 405 and 400 edge. That's your property line. So all this is within your lands.
No,
You're saying 300. 300 is not.
no, number 100. So you got the north-south line roadway on the right side, everything to the right of that, and that 40, and the rest of that
half
100.
yours and half not yours, right?
So it depends if we're
There's
doing
no
regional
ponds and not-
stormwater management versus individual development management. That's, I don't know how you usually.
Yeah, I don't know how that gets addressed, so that, you have to forgive me on some of that, I'm just.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I was misunderstanding your
No.
question. Do you, I guess I'll ask to the city is, do you usually do some regional ponding that's beyond one single development? Or is it development by development management?
In some cases, there has been a regional stormwater facility. It's not standard. We certainly have that possibility to do that, generally there's been development by development and stormwater facilities. However, of course, if those lands are still draining that way to you, you will still take those waters, right? You can't turn away
Oh,
water.
under certain conditions, yeah,
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah, so we can discuss that we can alter the sub-watersheds.
Well, I just noticed that looks like all those other ones have basically their drain within the parcels pretty much per se. Now, if it just worked out that way or what, but it was just one of those things that caught my eye.
Right.
It's easier to address here than it is later, so.
Yep.
If we're built that way, you need to be compensated both for the land and the cost of the pond.
I mean, obviously there's merits to savings of having a larger facility than having smaller ones or not as efficient. So I understand that point, and it's a fair one to make.
If we could circle back to the land use, maybe this is taking us off of the flow here, but if there's reluctance to acknowledge in an official way that we're talking about a school on your land that's outside of the planning area, but we're planning enough use here to really call for a school, seems like we have a problem.
I agree with you, because the school has indicated, based on my discussions with Brad, the school has indicated interest in this area and would like to partner with the city.
And so either we change the process to formalize that, or we find some place for it to fit in the study area that we already have.
Yeah. Because they've already eliminated south, right? The school's already said
I don't
south's
think-
not much of an option.
Yeah, I don't know that the school district has relinquished all of their options down there. I can't speak specifically to that, but that area, of course, isn't in a FUDA.
Right.
And the school district has indicated their interest in having elementary schools based in neighborhoods, serving neighborhoods.
And anything south would be 2 or 3 steps away.
Right,
Yeah,
and
so
a much
common
longer
sense
term
would-
picture than what we have
So
right
common sense would say south is not an option, like unless the school is forced, that's the only land you can buy, why would they buy it?
And where we were initially locked in on with being in the study area was where we're seeing the business park west of Commerce Park, because it was on what is a secondary major route, which the busing for that purposes is better than within a full neighborhood. Like, let's say if it was further down where the orange is, it made sense there. And in conversations, more interest in business park, and that's why we kind of offloaded it to that location in an area that wasn't really planned for. But it's not specifically in the neighborhood plan. So, yes, I mean, I agree with Jason that there was interest from the beginning with general steering committee and from the public of, complete neighborhood, and that they had interest in this area. I don't know how we want to memorialize that into the plan.
Deanna, can you clarify the significance of designating what's been designated as either in or not in a FUDA? How does that matter here?
So we're doing a neighborhood plan, and by the direction that we follow under our adopted comp plan, we are looking at land uses and future land uses and planning within that FUDA specifically. That said, it certainly is within the city's purview and ability to, especially when we go into our comp plan update, which is coming up, to take a broader look at all of the future land uses, even outside of the FUDA.
And I'll note that the FUDAs that are on the books now were intended to accommodate the population growth through either 2050 or 2060. So I think it was 2050.
It's 2050.
So that was at least in 2009 when those were put into place. That was the expected population growth for what is now the next 25 years. fairly certain that our population growth has exceeded what was projected in 2009. So it's likely that our existing FUDAs, if they were not changed, would necessarily extend all the way out to 2050. But I think that's part of what we need to look at when we do our next comp plan update.
I don't think I ever picked up on the why this FUDA wraps around.
That's a good question.
And I couldn't speak to that other than,
I think we're all gonna look at each other.
other than gravity fed sewer would be my guess, is at the time that they drew those lines, they were thinking that this was, and that was a big priority in 2000, prior to 2000.
Meaning which portions could and couldn't be served by gravity here? I'm asking. That wasn't rhetorical. Which portions here can and can't be served by gravity?
Well, we haven't gotten there. We can do majority of it at this point now, based on what we've reviewed.
I think the FUDA development may have shown that the area south of this was more difficult to serve.
Okay, yeah, and so this to me is like an infill site then at that point. I mean, when we talk about is it in or not in a FUDA, and the not in is further out, yeah, I understand that's gonna be a conversation. But when the not in is closer in,
Yeah.
It just seems like it's a gap that needs to be filled.
And my assumption as to why that is not in the FUDA is because it's already in the urban service area.
Sure, and it's been there for a while,
Yeah.
right?
As far back as I've seen on the maps.
Yeah.
I don't know when it was
I think it
formally
was
brought
before I
in.
started here, and it's been 30 years, so.
Someone got it in at some point, and it's just that it hasn't been developed because it's been on.
Well, remember, the north side of the road was active quarry until not too long ago too, so.
Yeah.
Things have changed a lot over
If
there.
the school doesn't decide to buy this land and put it in here, that's one thing. I liked the idea, I liked it where it was, and it was in the neighborhood. We can talk about it more officially. From the single family neighborhood that you are gonna plan to build in the north, and the transition to the high density and the density we see south, it's kind of a nice transition. It's still the focal point of the neighborhood. And it's removed from being right off of Arterial Road, which I'm glad to see that the school district doesn't want. I've seen that happen in too many communities now where it's always on the major road and outside the neighborhood. This is, I think, glad to hear that they actually want it to be part of the neighborhood. So again, I don't know where this is gonna go from this conversation we added to it. I think it's still a potential site, but it is currently outside of what is the specific study area. I don't know, Jason, what your thoughts are on that with that question then.
Well, I think the city should amend their plan to show a school here. I know the landowner prefer the flexibility of not having to be committed to a school, and it's dependent on the school district to actually buy the land. But from an urban design perspective, this area seems to need a school.
But if not selected as a school, I could see the crosshatch. If we're talking about actually rendering it, which we've got to talk to staff on how we want to do that, it would show residential as the alternative.
I guess my last question on this topic, not to belabor it too much, but is it plausible that one of the outcomes of this process is the city amending the future land use map for an area that includes this?
I've been thinking about that, and I could see it.
It is possible.
Yeah, I could see this plan maybe making a recommendation about that or something.
And so the landowner then is either feeling that we're messing with them beyond the limits of what was there, or they're getting something extra out of this process. Some more secure planning, thought, and commitment beyond what was expected. I don't know which that is.
All right. So then let's talk about to the east. Now this drains further to the east to a closed depression. So this results in increased performance standards. I've highlighted those in orange below. So I didn't hit it on the previous slide, but they both look at peak discharge control for 1, 2, 10, 100, and 200 year 24-hour storm event. Infiltration to the west is 90% pre-development inflammation volumes under post-development conditions, while to a closed depression, that goes up to the 100%. Both have water quality retaining 80% of total suspended solids post-development. And then to the closed depression, you have the additional volume control from 1 year up to 200 year 24-hour storm. So that's why this is a smaller area, but you're still seeing quite a bit focused on stormwater. When we talked about the parkland, what I slid over on what I wanted to talk about is also we looked at, do we put all the stormwater on the eastern boundary? So to get that 17-acre park. So in our numbers, that actually assumed, let's move, this mouse is not working for me, but 515 and the wet all becomes east of that, north of Collector A east, so there's no orange. It's all one green area along the property line, which represents the future land use. So that allows for a more maximized, larger park and minimizes needing additional parks within that development. Go back, not to keep jumping around. That is represented in the future land use map, right here. So that MDR is not on the east side of that road. That allows for the 17-acre of full park. So there's one park space for that entire development. All the east side is for stormwater, but part of that is because of the increased requirements for going to closed depression. So what matters most is actually what's going to be required of performance standards. That would ultimately probably be within the urban service area amendment conditions. So just that's the biggest key point is this stuff. Sanitary design, it's pretty small, but the main point was there's two ways that really to serve this neighborhood. Option one is from Lacey and Fitrona. It does show that it would run through the projected development in the northwest along Collector A, serving south and east. The other option is MMSD is planning for an expansion of their line, which is shown in that circle, that would get it over to Fitrona, and that's another way to connect. Ultimately, the main point is which direction would not exceed 30 feet depth of sanitary below. Currently, this recommendation is likely number one from Lacey and Fitrona. Traffic. So we route trip generation based on development uses using trip generation manual. So basically that provides average AM and PM peak trips based on uses. So we assumed a full build out in 2045. Some of the uses we looked at was low-rise apartments, which is up to 3 stories, mid-rise is 4 to 10. Then there's office, coffee shop. Strip retail is something we've used for both separate individual buildings as well as within a mixed-use building. The factors you use with those uses is either housing units, which we talked about. We divvied them up by acreage, by the density. In the case to be most conservative, we want the higher number. So I mentioned that 5,000 housing units. That's what we're using here to gauge. So that's like the extreme case, likely. But for the commercial and business park, we looked at other developments within the area of what building coverage is on those lots to determine general square footage of those uses. And that helps to equate to what is the trip generation. There is another factor about what development happens around here also that would run through the neighborhood. Typically, county uses 0.4, we're using 0.5, again, being very conservative. And this does include the planned neighborhood in the northeast. And we looked, so just not wanting to get in the weeds, but showing you that how that looks, right? You have certain uses, this is truncated, there's a lot of different ones of these, this is not all of them. To get to that bottom portion there, talking about AM peak hour in and out, peak PM in and out. Don't need specifically for you to gauge on that. I think we'll just talk about, we looked at 2 major intersections here. And this information, I don't know if that was what we provided. Did we provide this? I'm trying to remember if we did or not. The trip generation. We are going to still do signal warrants. That hasn't been done yet. But generally speaking, staff recommends, and if it doesn't meet warrants, we still think a roundabout is the ideal for increased safety, longevity, residual capacity there, better off-peak operation, and lower long-term maintenance costs. So that is currently the recommendation for Commerce Park and Lacey. Looking at Collector A Fitchrona over here, which is also at the same intersection of Tonto Trail, likely would not meet warrants for controlled intersection. It does show that the left turn westbound onto Fitchrona is what is level of service F. Preferably it's D or better, but typically longer delays is more tolerable on the side streets. City could monitor the intersection and development occurs. Again, we looked at the extreme high level of unit counts. So that I would say is pretty comfortable at this moment to think that it may not warrant signal, but it could be reviewed over time and check traffic volumes there. But we'll still run that traffic warrants on that. I asked the question specifically once if, not like a DOT project, the city could choose to put one in still, but they don't recommend it because they believe it actually increases crashes. I didn't ask more specifics, but just letting you know that they don't suggest putting it in if it doesn't warrant it.
That'd be a light signal, yeah. Because people get stuck waiting with no traffic, and then they just go.
Yeah.
Until they do that at a time when there actually was traffic. And didn't see.
That seems like common sense, yes. That was the answer. Any other, so I went through where we're at with the engineering pieces. Is there anything else you want to go back to or ask questions on?
The road, the extension of Commerce Park Drive up the hill, how steep is that?
So I guess I didn't touch on that. In further conversations with the landowner and understanding more of what overburdened the land that's above the rock and what could be brought to the site, it is agreed that that connection through makes sense and that it's plausible that that wall would not be as thought originally.
The south wall of the Yara.
Correct.
Say that again?
That Commerce Park Drive, in the last talk, can go through, we can achieve that grades to allow for it to go from Collector A south.
Which is?
As long as the southern property owners are amicable.
Sure. Sounds good. Agreed. But so even though it's just dashed here, and that's the one thing I will follow up with the mobility team, is it's intended now to be proposed that it goes through and heads south to Grandview.
What is the grade? Any idea?
What's that?
What is the grade? Any idea?
Well, right now, they're probably, as proposed on our reclamation plans, you probably got a 40-foot.
By code, you probably have to hit like 7% as a maximum on a collector.
So Bob, what you're seeing here is what was reclamation plan showed 2% grades that's tying back in. So you see the white lines is actually suggesting that it would be filled in and not have that grade change that you see in the black lines.
Got it. And so I guess that'd be you'd be have a question then when developing the our lands, whether to require that that be built to the edge. If the landowner to the south isn't ready.
I mean, typical development would say if the future land use map shows that that road would extend south, as the development happens, that would be a discussion, but typically you stub it to the end of your property.
Mm-hmm. It's just on some of these, it's hatched on others. I wasn't sure how firm.
Yeah, so that hatch is going away. This was an older
Okay.
aesthetic, but if we go back to the future land use map.
Sure. How steep is that park? So you identified that as a larger park with a larger sort of service area. What's the grade across that park, and what kind of uses does that park become useful for?
Well, we already, originally when we thought we needed a wall, we were going 4-to-1 quick as fast as we can for the first 150 feet. And so that you would have a salvageable flatter portion for other amenities and recreational activities. If they're able to grade with more fill than we intended, we have more flexibility to even have more in play. It just takes out the idea of, was the vision when people talked about it, is maybe there could be mountain biking built into that. If there's still extra topsoil and other things that would be better left on site, maybe you can still achieve some of that activity at a smaller scale.
Yeah, thank you.
Otherwise, I believe that's mostly what I wanted to cover. I do have a slide on just the next steps. I appreciate everyone's flexibility. We've been a long pause. We've found another neighborhood that also had a lot of conversations, and we've had more conversations even internally here that has kind of progressed the land use plan. So we have had steering committees in November of 23, January in 24, March in 24, and now today. We had 2 open houses, key stakeholder interviews, online survey, development focus group. Don't know if we locked in assumption of a November meeting. We were potentially look at.
It is not locked in, but I think November 20th is looking most likely to work.
Wednesday?
Oh, sorry.
21st, I think it is.
21st, whatever that Thursday is that we were looking at, let me double check.
Yeah, Thursday would be the 21st in November.
So it's a week before Thanksgiving is on the 28th.
Yeah.
So that's, we can check after the meeting, but that was kind of our intention of a November meeting to cover further on the engineering. Also talking about a sector map, which is the other direction beyond going conventional zoning, phasing, and start of the fiscal impact analysis. So appreciate everyone's time. I don't know if there's any follow-up comments, steering committee, if anyone from the public wanted to speak.
We have a smaller group than last week.
100%.
I appreciate you putting up with all my comments.
No, and I wanted to say thank you, everyone. This was a great discussion. So it's been good discussion, and we I think got a lot accomplished. So
Yeah.
just want to double check. Did either of you want to speak? Okay.
Are you, whatever you put up today, is that going to be made available so you just look at it again?
Yep.
I'll put it up on the website, and if you want, I can send an
Can
email.
you just email it to us?
Yeah, I can do that.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.